The three original Monty Python films are probably the most influential films for comedy since the Charlie Chaplin movies. While these movies aren't a trilogy in the traditional sense, I still consider them a trilogy, how I consider Edgar Wright's Cornetto trilogy a trilogy. These movies reinvented absurdist comedy, and they've had a long-lasting cultural impact. The Holy Grail is probably in my top 5 favorite comedies of all time. So, similar to what I did for George Romero's Dead trilogy, I'm gonna do that for the Monty Python trilogy. Review each of the movies and rank them at the end. So, let's move on to the first one. Monty Python and the Holy Grail is one of the funniest movies I have ever seen in my life. This movie is literally the opposite of forgettable. I can remember every single scene in this movie. And of course, it's quotable. Who can forget "'Tis but a scratch," or "Who are you who are so wise in the ways of science?" Out of the entire trilogy, this movie is easily the best. I've seen this movie 3 times now, and each time I've found a new joke that I didn't know before. They take every opportunity they can to tell a joke. They don't care about continuity or the dignity of the actors. They'll do whatever they can to make the audience laugh. This movie is endlessly creative. They didn't have the budget for horses, so they turned that into a joke. They just had the night servants bang 2 coconuts together and pretend they were horses. If I had to find a flaw with this movie, is that I was laughing too much that it made my throat hurt. This is a movie where you can tell everyone on set was clearly having a good time. This movie also weirdly has an amazing score. It's about as perfect and funny as a movie can get, and for that reason, I'm gonna have to give it 100% toothpaste meter.
Always look on the bright side of life.
Life of Brian is pretty awesome. Though not as good as The Holy Grail, it doesn't fail as a comedy in the slightest. I don't give this movie enough credit. It's actually really, really hilarious. This movie probably has the most narrative out of the 3 Monty Python movies, because Holy Grail was kind of a bunch of skits, and The Meaning of Life was just a bunch of skits. This movie actually has kind of a story. This movie easily has the best music out of the trilogy too. The opening song is a blast, and the ending song is funny as hell. There are some pretty good gags in this movie. Who can forget Biggest Dickus? The scene that goes on for way too long and is all the better for it. The absurdist humor in this movie is also really good. I like how in one scene, Brian just randomly goes into an alien spaceship. It feels like this movie has a lot to say without even meaning to say it. About how absurd religion is, and how naive we all are, and doing it all in a comedic way. For a budget of only $4 million, the costumes and sets are really impressive. What else can I say? It's just a solid movie. Life of Brian is amazing. It's free on Netflix. I would recommend you watch it now, and it's gonna get an 89% toothpaste meter.
Every sperm is sacred.
Monty Python's The Meaning of Life is not a bad movie by any means, but it is easily the worst out of the entire trilogy. While The Life of Brian almost unintentionally had some deeper messages, this movie tries to intentionally have some deeper messages. Instead of Monty Python skits, it feels a lot like SNL skits. Don't get me wrong, while not as good as the Life of Brian songs, the songs in this movie are really good, my personal favorite being the Galaxy song. I feel like this one focused more on shock value humor and gross out humor, rather than absurdist and clever humor. Speaking of absurdist humor, my favorite scene in the movie is, "Where is the fish?"
A fish, a fish, a fishy, ooh. Oh, fishy, 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 fish.
I don't want to sound like I'm being too negative, because I really do like this movie, but compared to the other 2 movies, this one is just not as good. While I will be rewatching certain scenes from this movie, it's going to be a long time before I revisit the entire movie. And with all that said, I'm going to give Monty Python's The Meaning of Life a 67% toothpaste meter. As you can tell by watching this video, the Monty Python trilogy has had a huge effect on me. As for ranking them, I would say these movies get progressively worse as they go along. So I would say Holy Grail is my favorite, followed by The Life of Brian, and then The Meaning of Life is my least favorite. Well, that's gonna do it for this video, and remember, always look on the brighter side of life.